Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
We have the supplies, the teams, and the plans in place. What we don't have is access.
Pushing to get more humanitarian assistance into Gaza and calling for a ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and Hamas.
That UN support, UN solidarity with Malian people will continue.
As a key UN peacekeeping operation draws to a close, a look at the decade-long mission in Mali. Shifting to cleaner, greener transportation. Electric vehicles are gaining traction in what was once the world's most polluted city. Next.
Conflicts around the world are high on the agenda as diplomats begin a new year here at the UN. It has been 3 months since violence erupted between Israel and Hamas, and the humanitarian challenges have grown more dire with each passing day.
The situation is indescribable. Almost 90% of the population of Gaza, 1.9 million people, have been displaced, and many have been forced to move multiple times. People are standing in line for hours for a small amount of water, which may not be clean, or bread, which alone is not sufficiently nutritious. Only 15 hospitals are functioning, even partially. The lack of clean water and sanitation and overcrowded living conditions are creating the ideal environment for disease to spread.
The UN is hoping to get more aid into the region. This week, Sigrid Kaag started her assignment as Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza. She will monitor and try to accelerate humanitarian relief, an effort that remains difficult among the fighting and without a lasting ceasefire. Shudaja is monitoring developments inside the halls of the UN. Deja.
Yes, Elaine, this week the General Assembly held a meeting on U.S. veto in Security Council. To recap the situation, in December, UN Security Council adopted a resolution on Gaza. However, when Russia asked for an amendment to urge for immediate humanitarian ceasefire, U.S. vetoed this amendment. And according to a General Assembly resolution in 2022, the permanent members of the Security Council have to explain themselves in General Assembly when the veto was cast. U.S. Deputy Representative Ambassador Robert Wood argued that when urging for a ceasefire, the resolution failed to ask Hamas to lay down its weapons. Many countries in their statements believed only a ceasefire could alleviate the suffering of Gaza people.
Although the people of Gaza need all possible assistance, the final text of this resolution is detached from the ongoing painful reality on the ground. We cannot allow for senseless bombing to continue under the misleading and inaccurate guise of the right to self-defense. If we, as the international community, truly hope to alleviate the suffering of the residents of Gaza, we must demand an immediate ceasefire.
The Deputy Permanent Representative of China to the United Nations, Ambassador Geng Shuang, in his statement, stressed that the immediate realization of a ceasefire in Gaza is the universal call of the international community, and it is the most basic requirement for peace to be restored. And China is disappointed by and regrets the exercise of yet another veto by the United States, as at the Security Council in December. And saving civilian lives, avoiding regional instability, and upholding the two-state solution all require an immediate ceasefire. Let's take a listen.
We are disappointed by and regret the exercise of yet another veto by the United States at the Security Council on December 22, 2023. China has repeatedly pointed out that the realization of a ceasefire is an overriding prerequisite. The international community must pull all of its efforts to promote an immediate ceasefire to end the fighting.
推动立即停火止战。
While the General Assembly was meeting on the veto, a group of rabbis, however, made their voice heard by protesting in the Security Council chamber as well as disrupting the General Assembly meeting.
We are here to encourage all member states to reaffirm and recommit the goals of the United Nations Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, offering not just words of solidarity with Palestinians, but meaningful action to save lives.
The 40-ish rabbis were from several states in the U.S. asking Biden administration to stop vetoing peace and to save Palestinian and Israeli lives. They were escorted out of the UN headquarters by the security. After they left the building, some spoke to the media.
For the lack of a better term, the stupidest thing any politician can do right now when looking at representing the American people is not listening to the American people. And the American people are saying in a very clear voice that we support a ceasefire. And it's also important for us as Jewish people not to let the narrative and not to let anyone say that this is being done for Jewish safety. And I will say personally, as an Israeli citizen and as a Jewish American, every day the war continues is a day where more and more Palestinians are killed, more and more Palestinians are injured and expelled from their homes, and more Jews are threatened and more Jews are put at risk. This is not for anyone's safety.
Well, that's all from me, Elaine.
A U.S. and UK-led coalition launched airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen, a day after the UN Security Council condemned attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Those attacks have disrupted international shipping for months. Jody Jacobs has more on the resolution.
The resolution was put together by the United States and Japan, with member states negotiating its contents for the past couple of days. On Wednesday, 11 member states voted in favor. 4 member states, including China, abstained. No one voted against the resolution. Member states say it was important for the Security Council to take action as the attacks against ships in the Red Sea have seriously disrupted international trade on this key route between Europe and Asia. Many shipping companies have been forced to reroute their ships, taking a much longer route around South Africa. The resolution not only condemns the attacks by the Houthis, it also demands that they immediately cease such attacks and release more than 25 hostages. China called on the Houthis to abide by the provisions of the Council resolution and immediately stop the attacks, but warns that the current tensions are just one of the manifestations of the conflict in Gaza.
It is a fact that cannot be ignored. China has repeatedly stressed the urgency of achieving an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. It is the overriding prerequisite for everything else and top priority for international diplomatic efforts. China will continue to work with the Council and international community to make unremitting efforts to promote the cessation of hostilities in Gaza.
The United States told the Security Council that the adoption of the resolution sends a strong message that the threat to navigational rights and freedoms in the Red Sea is a global challenge and necessitated a global response.
Repeated Houthi attacks on international shipping are a security threat. They are an economic threat, increasing the prices people pay for food, medicine, and energy. And as the resolution before us emphasizes, they are a humanitarian threat, undermining the ability of the international community to deliver assistance to more than 21 million Yemeni people in need. For all these reasons, it is vital that the Security Council speak up on the need to uphold international law as well as navigational rights and freedoms.
The United States warned the Houthis of consequences should they not immediately stop firing on commercial vessels in the busy international shipping corridor. But the Houthis maintain they are targeting Israeli-linked vessels in support of Palestinians in Gaza. Jody Jacobs, CGTN, New York.
Chinese diplomat Liu Jianchao met with the Secretary General this week. Liu is a minister of the Central Committee's International Department. He is also expected to visit Washington, D.C. and San Francisco. This could be a challenging year for the global economy. A UN report predicts a slowdown after stronger than expected results in 2023. Many of the world's leading economies, including China and the U.S., are expected to slow. The UN says the world is struggling to get back to pre-pandemic growth levels. Violent conflicts, climate change, rising interest rates, and the impact of inflation are all contributing to the economic challenges, especially for developing nations.
In about a quarter of all developing countries, the annual inflation forecast for 2024 is over 10%. That'll be eroding away what people's earnings can buy and inflicting further pain, especially on the middle class and people in poverty. And hunger will continue to be a special concern.
The UN is calling for increased international cooperation to stimulate growth and accelerate progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals.
Coming up.
I believe that the mission has delivered or achieved important results. There is no doubt about it.
UN Insider.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
December brought the end of a decade-long mission for UN peacekeepers in Mali. The operation included more than 15,000 personnel around the West African nation. More than 300 members of the peacekeeping mission lost their lives over the last 10 years. Robert Nigilla has more on the withdrawal.
11th December 2023. The United Nations mission in Mali lowers its flag at its headquarters in the capital Bamako for the last time, signaling the end of the UN peacekeeping mission in the country after 10 years.
Overall, 10,754 peacekeeping personnel out of 13,871 have now departed Mali, and the remainder will leave by the end of December.
The UN multidimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, known as MINUSMA, was deployed in Mali in 2013 after separatist rebels and militants occupied the northern part of the country. Research carried out by the Effectiveness of Peace Operations Network shows in the first 3 years of the mission, MINUSMA bolstered stability in the north, reducing civilian deaths. But in the period since, its effectiveness reduced. Support for the peacekeeping mission began to wane after Mali's military government accused the peacekeepers of failing to protect civilians. Thousands of civilians have been killed and hundreds of thousands displaced following increased attacks by militants. In July this year, a UN Security Council's bid to renew MINUSMA's mandate was thrown into disarray after the government demanded the immediate withdrawal of the peacekeeping force. In 2021, France announced the withdrawal of its forces from Mali following 2 military coups and the presence of Russian private security contractors.
What we're clearly seeing here is not just the UN exiting, but the Malian government making it, precisely clear that they have now established new partnership, which means the gaps will be closed, and they've also established a national strategy to deal with the insurgency themselves. So we've got to give them the opportunity to do that.
For now, the military government appears to have the support of a huge section of the population. But that support will be tested by the government's ability in restoring peace and stability where UN peacekeepers failed. Robert Nagela, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
El Gassam Wan served as special representative to the Secretary General in Mali.
UN agencies, funds and programs were in Mali well before the deployment of MINUSMA and will stay in Mali well after the withdrawal of MINUSMA. That means that UN support, UN solidarity with Malian people will continue. And of course, there are a host of issues on which development and other related issues on which the UN can make a meaningful contribution to Mali. And I have no doubt that in so doing, they'll also build on the achievements that were made by MINUSMA. They're far from being perfect, but I believe some milestones have been laid, and they need to build on them to help Mali definitely turn the page of violence and open a new chapter in its history.
Around the globe, 52 people became victims of homicide every hour in 2021. That year, homicide claimed more lives than armed conflict and terrorism combined. A new report from the UN's Office on Drugs and Crime shows Brazil is dealing with the highest homicide rate in the world. Paulo Cabral has the details.
This forensics team of São Paulo's police has just been called to one of the city's most violent districts, Capão Redondo. 2 people have been killed and the perpetrators are unknown. This kind of incident is not rare in this area, nor in the country as a whole. According to a new UN report, Brazil saw the highest total number of homicides in the world in recent years, recording almost 48,000 in 2020. That was more than 10% of the world's total. Nigeria and India followed. Measured in per capita terms, Brazil had about 22 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants, well above the world average of 5.8. Brazilian NGO Sul da Paz estimates using official data that only about a third of murders in Brazil are solved.
In the explanation, there is some high level of violence. And that's something that is visible in other countries of Latin America. High level of homicides linked to organized crime. In Latin America, they represent almost 50% of homicides. Whereas, for example, in Europe, it's less than 10%.
Tão difícil de você prevenir, né?
In the case of homicides, it's so difficult to prevent. How can I prevent a homicide that is so sudden? Sometimes even a trivial bar fight ends in one person killing another. This happens a lot. How do I prevent an execution? As we have seen a lot, people are being abducted from somewhere and executed in what they call crime tribunals.
Here in the state of São Paulo, there is a center for reference and support for victims of crimes against life, known as CRAVI. It's a crucial service recognizing that in cases of homicides, the individuals who die are not the only victims.
Então, a vítima direta é a vítima sobrevivente do que...
The direct victim is the surviving victim of what we call crimes against life, such as homicide, femicide, and robbery followed by death. So, we attend the surviving victims of these crimes and also the indirect victims, that is, family members who have lost friends and relatives.
Simone is among indirect victims assisted by CRAVI. Her daughter, 27-year-old Thais, was killed by her partner, leaving 2 small children. The perpetrator was caught and is in jail awaiting trial. Simone says she wants justice, but not revenge.
Ele está preso. Está preso. Deixa ele pagar lá.
He's in jail. If he pays what he has to pay and gets out, I hope he becomes a better person. I put myself in the place of his mother and him too, because such a young person, when they do something like this, it seems to end not only their life but also the mother's life.
With the reasons for homicides varied and complex, it's a huge challenge for countries like Brazil to find strategies to bring the numbers down. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, São Paulo.
Coming up.
We
are entering a new era. We are leaving fossil fuels behind.
Countries around the globe are shifting away from fossil fuels toward cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. New energy vehicles are a big part of the transition. In Mexico's capital, more electric cars are hitting the streets, and many of them come from Chinese automakers.
For 20 years, Ernesto has driven delivery trucks through the streets of Mexico City. He works at Grupo Modelo, the largest distributor of beer in the Mexican capital, which has recently made a major change in how they work, moving away from combustion vehicles and now making deliveries using Chinese-made electric trucks.
We are entering a new era. We are leaving fossil fuels behind. Nowadays, people are realizing how much pollution there is. Putting a truck like this on the road helps change that.
These trucks can go up to 3 days without needing to be recharged. Grupo Modelo aims to have 15% of its fleet electric by 2025. As the market leader, this company's decision to make the transition to electric vehicles is significant and marks a shifting trend in Mexico.
A nivel país se está avanzando en cuanto a la introducción de la electromovilidad, entonces creo que
I think around the country electromobility is moving forward. A lot of people in government and in the private sector are committed to this transition, and people like it too.
This sprawling metropolis of over 22 million people is situated in a high-altitude valley and has an insufficient public transport system which has contributed to poor air quality. Mexico's Environment Secretary Alejandro Villegas says the level of pollution reached a critical point.
In 1990, Mexico City was considered to be the most polluted city in the world.
Villegas says 68% of trips made on public transportation in Mexico's capital are now made on electrically powered vehicles. Chinese brands are increasingly visible in the market. CGTN was invited to test drive the latest models made by BYD. It's the same company that supplied the EV trucks to Grupo Modelo. BYD says the main challenge to growth is the lack of infrastructure for electric vehicles.
This is a challenge, but we know that as soon as the Mexican market wants to adopt new vehicles of new energy, it's going to be easier to work all together, government, companies, and the private consumers to grow this market.
Social media influencer and journalist Fernanda Lara believes the shift in Latin America's second largest economy to electric vehicles is gathering speed.
Lo principal yo creo que sería el tiempo.
She says the main thing is that it will take time and a willingness to accept the reality, which is that the future will be electric. In what was once the most polluted city in the Americas, from major delivery companies to the consumer market, the electrical vehicle transition has begun. Joel Richards for CGTN in Mexico City.
A new class of electric transportation could soon be taking off. Some industry experts believe EV takeoff and landing vehicles could be the future of sustainable transportation. Omar Khan has more.
In the not-so-distant future, safe, autonomous, and eco-friendly air transport may become the norm for people going from point A to point B. That's how many of China's eVTOL companies are branding themselves, with hopes their aircraft could play a major role in what's seen as the fourth revolution of human transportation.
EHang is going with the trend of urban transportation. Traditional transportation is one-dimensional. This new mode of air mobility is green, driven by pure electricity, while vertical takeoff and landing can ensure low costs for resource and facility construction. In a world of multi-dimensional transportation, our aircraft can operate efficiently in low-altitude channels. This will greatly improve the efficiency of people's transportation options within or between cities.
Many of these aircraft are defined as being autonomous or self-flying, but that could push some prospective passengers, especially the average consumer, to question safety. eVTOL manufacturers, however, are adamant that safety is their top priority, particularly if they want to see full commercialization of their aerial vehicles in the future.
There's also distributed electric propulsion.
and everything is we have safety redundancy designed. All the control service, all the control parts, we have more than one or two redundancy already designed. So through this redundancy, it can actually make the level of this eVTOL aircraft closer to the safety level of a commercial airliner.
Aside from safety, the environment is another vital priority for these companies. They say they're taking on the responsibility of increasing green transportation and reducing the aviation industry's carbon footprint.
From one perspective, when your aircraft are operating in large quantities, each one can reduce its corresponding impact on the environment through means of electrification and green energy. Aside from a convenient way of life and travel, the concept of green and environmental protection is important. We are pursuing technical progressiveness while maintaining and going green.
As the populations of cities and urban areas continue to grow, eVTOL manufacturers aren't looking to replace traditional forms of transport, but instead to complement them. So the reality of flying taxis that people have long dreamed about is perhaps ready to take off. Omar Khan, CGTN, Zhuhai.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider.